All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode 350 here on Stu and the Nun. And Toby couldn't make it tonight. He got some stuff going on down in Cabo with his wonderful family. So Rob, the unpaid producer, has joined us. He is in the front of the camera this time. And of course, if you've been a fan of the show for a while, you recognize Mr. Matt Thomas, also known as Deputy One Time. Pima County, right? Pima County, Arizona?
Pinal.
Oh, it's Pinal. Dang it. All right, Pinal County. Oh, no, I thought it was Pima.
Close.
Pinal, I know it is. Starts with P's in Arizona. I mean, I got a couple points there. But, Matt, welcome back to the show. It's been a long time, my friend.
It has been. Thanks for having me back. Glad to join you.
Yeah, it's good to be back. You've been a busy cat, so we got a lot to catch up on since we last had you on. Good. You're down there in Arizona fighting the good fight. And doing things to protect your community and protect the state and really protect the country. So, yeah, how's
yes,
that?
Sir.
How's that?
It's going better.
It's
a lot better than it was. Yeah. So, as of the 21st of January, things are looking a lot different. We have a lot more support from our federal partners. They have been showing up in droves. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting with some of our federal partners today, and just talking about how we can collaborate and how we could support them, how they can support us as the country kind of moves forward to correct the last 4 years.
So is this these are, when you say federal partners, right? There's a number of different agencies. That this is folks you probably have known and worked with in the past or whatever that just now have kind of gotten the lack of a better term, excuse the pun, had the cuffs taken off from them to actually start working with you.
That was actually a statement made during the meeting today that the cuffs are off and we are back to regular cop business, not trying to dance around the subjects and not trying to let the country kind of be invaded by criminal organizations. And so there was a lot of discussion on, and to your point, these are guys that I've worked with throughout the years. And a lot of these guys know how to get the job done. They just haven't been allowed to do their job. And so there is a sense of relief across all federal agencies. And I can tell you that the coolest thing is I've never seen, especially like the DOJ, I've never seen the DOJ align so good, where all agencies are lining up and collaborative. They're being collaborative in their efforts with each other and with state and locals. So it's really a cool thing to watch.
Now I want to jump right into it because you talk about. I mean, you hear a lot of stuff, see stuff on the news. We know there's the guys and gals are in the trenches working every day that or become that like or don't like or have all kind of different political backgrounds or beliefs, and there's those that are appointed at the top and that are very much more political and don't actually do this stuff. when the folks and I know from
Right.
my own thing, but I imagine you've seen it where during those times when they were not allowed, when those handcuffs were on, I'm sure they had to be venting to you about how frustrating it was that they couldn't work the job with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually had, it was funny because we would joke about it. We had Border Patrol snitches, almost like confidential informants that we would reach out to, and we would say, "Hey, we know that you can't necessarily discuss anything going on, but we can. We know what we're seeing. What are you guys seeing?" And we would get the lowdown on here's what's really going on behind the scenes. And when you had the president or his staff, last president, not the current, so if you had 46 and his staff saying one thing on the news, we knew that not to be true, and we knew that there was a lot more to it behind the scenes, like with Border Patrol, ICE, HSI. We would reach out to those contacts and say, okay, give us a skinny on what's going on here. Why are they saying this compared to what we know is actually happening? And they would give us kind of the breakdown on the smoke screen and why it was being put up and how it was being put up, and allowed us to kind of break through the BS and continue to do the cop work. And so, like cops do all around the nation, we worked around this problem, and we continued to do the work we could. Even the federal level, they would continue to do the work they could behind the scenes, knowing that, or hoping that, we would see an end to that. And then, of course, I think America spoke resoundingly in this election, and luckily we are back to some law and order.
Yeah, yeah, and were they ever? I know we hear about more of that locals are local law enforcement, state and city and stuff are sometimes in some very liberal places are not allowed to share info with the feds. Were they? Were they ever blocked from sharing info from you? Was there anything they couldn't? I know they may not, they weren't allowed. Like you wanted to go after bad guys or people jumping the border and stuff, and they may not have been allowed to. But were they limited in the intel they could share with you?
Uh, on the official channels, absolutely. Yeah, we essentially overnight, when Biden took office, they cut off all lines of communications. So all federal agencies were given, new executive orders, new marching orders, and overnight the communication was cut off with local and state law enforcement, and they stopped talking to us. And so official channels became non-existent. It was those unofficial channels, because one thing Washington fails to see, and actually I can't say currently, because President Trump has always understood this, and he knows how to work it. But most of those politicians back there fail to realize that we are all people living together, right? And so the cops just happen to be doing a job together, and whether they're federal, state, or local, we all kind of live and work in the same community, and we all kind of strive for the same things, right? We want law and order, and we want our community to be safe, and so we will figure out a way. And a lot of times when we're handcuffed by administrations, we just have to work back channels, and that's what was going on. Is there was a lot of back channel work by the federal agencies that still wanted to get the job done, and a lot of conversations, because I had spent time with a lot of those guys on the ground doing the job, and you form those relationships and that trust, and you're able to still get stuff done despite those so-called leaders.
Yeah, I would imagine that they if they're local, I mean they live there too. Their kids are in those schools. They shop in those stores. I mean
Yep.
they're not oblivious to any of the bad things that can happen. They want their community safe just as well. They're not flying in from out of town
Right.
when they're stationed at their assignment. But Rob, would you add
Yep.
something?
Yeah, I wanted to just real quick on deterrence, right? And how much the difference in the strength of, a president who's not going to put up with those open borders helps you do your job and helps the other law enforcement. And are you seeing, just by that pure deterrence, a huge drop in numbers?
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, they were dropping numbers today on some of the news channels talking about the significant decrease. We started realizing that decrease no shit, the day after the election. So the day that we knew President Trump was going to be the next president, things started happening as far as it was related to Mexican cartel activity and what they were pushing, how they were pushing it. They started shifting right away and pivoting to a different model. And we saw significant numbers drop for the human trafficking part of it. And that has continued. So it absolutely works as a deterrent piece because under the last president, we would literally get groups of people that told us that our president said it was okay. They could come from whatever country and that it was okay. They could just come right in, no problem, and they would get to stay here. And so you would catch these people and you're like, no, like nobody said that. And they said, no, yeah, your president said it's okay. And so they were under a firm belief that at the time, President Biden had authorized everybody to just come into our country, and it was because of those weak policies and the lack of deterrence. And so as soon as you get somebody in that's like, no more, it's kind of like mom had let the kids run amok, and now dad showed up at home, and he has to give them a spanking to get them back in line, and then the house starts running normal again, right?
Yeah, I mean it's funny you say it, right? Because there were some I remember last year before that were like coming across with like Biden Harris T-shirts on, or "Thank you, President." Right?
Yeah. I voted for Biden.
Yeah.
Well, now you're going to see some the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl champion ones. But.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
That's it. But no, I mean it's. And cartels want the money, right? So if the cartels want the money, they are also spreading rumors and lies, saying, "Oh yeah, you're totally allowed in. Give you a phone and put you in a hotel in New York City and take you anywhere you want. But if you want to get there, it's $5,000, $10,000 a person, right?" So
right. And as you're seeing, the our own government was complicit in this, and as you're seeing the exposures happen day by day on the money that was being funneled by our own government to some of these NGOs that was then coming back and essentially facilitating human trafficking. You're kind of seeing why it was so prolific.
Are you seeing an increase in aggression from across the border? Or anybody coming across any kind of increased aggression?
So we're getting scattered intel that they are going to become more aggressive. And honestly, so right now we haven't seen anything in particular, right? Like up close and personal, but much like a schoolyard fight, there's a lot of flexing going on right now, right? A lot of smack talking of what we're going to do. We're going to do this, and we're going to green light cops and, all this stuff. And so there's a lot of that chatter going on, but I think you guys understand how we are built. Our military brothers and sisters are built the same way. And so we have people evil at our doorstep saying, we're going to come get you. We're like, hey, here's the line. We're going to be here.
Well, you see occasionally on the news, you're seeing, some shots being fired from across the border and things like that. So I didn't know if you're seeing some of that increased or, as opposed to what was doing before.
Nah, not quite yet. And again, before it was, they had no resistance, so there was no reason for them to threaten or use violence. And so again, what we're seeing right now is that that initial flex where they're trying to bump chests and kind of push buttons and see what the reaction is going to be. And of course, we're not falling for that. We're just holding our own and waiting. And so to answer the original question, nothing direct at us. There is some shots over the border here and there, but I wouldn't label those as all out, attacks on law enforcement or anything. I think those are independent idiots that probably act outside of their orders, because I think the cartel has an understanding of what President Trump is doing. And I think the last thing they want is for, we have those special dudes break glass in case of emergency. And I would dare to say that they are very afraid of those dudes being released. And so I don't think they want to push us to that.
Yeah, I was going to say it doesn't help them, and it probably helps us. when one of the first things that happened was they were all designated as terrorist organizations, which kind of gives us somewhat of a green light for some of those Title 50 guys.
Right.
Number one. Number two, their president folded pretty quick on tariffs and shoring up the border on their side and fentanyl. That I'm sure they're concerned that if President Trump or Marco Rubio let the Mexican government know, hey, we're coming across and we're taking this out because they're a threat, that there probably would not be much resistance from the Mexican government against that. They'd probably be like, here's the door, right? So come on.
Right.
So imagine that, and we're seeing this around the globe, right? We see this with Israel. We're seeing with hostages being let go. People all know President Trump from the first time. He does not just run his mouth. It's all not just words.
Right.
So,
he's very calculated in his decision making. And I can tell you, as we moved into his administration, we and you alluded to it when we were talking earlier, former Sheriff Lamb and I and our current Sheriff Ross Teeple, all three of us were down at the border when we were meeting with Tom Homan prior to them taking office, and they were kind of lining out what the plan was. And then as they have taken office, my now Sheriff Ross Teeple and I, we were back in D.C. A couple of weeks back meeting with some of our congressmen. And we were back there with a bunch of the sheriffs from all over the nation, meeting with our congressmen and our senators and kind of talking to them about the needs and the current situation. And I think our national leaders, our senators, our congressmen, despite party lines, I think they have an understanding that things are going to happen, right? Things are pushing forward, whether they agree with them philosophically or not. We're going a certain direction. And the president and his staff that he has put in place, they have had very calculated moves. And I think that President Trump understands maybe some of the spots in his first presidency where he turned left and he should have turned right. And I think now he has a clear understanding of each move that he makes and the ripple effect. And it's awesome to watch because it's very efficient to us as state and locals to watch this play out is awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned how regardless of where they fall in the party lines, that they know it's going to go through. I mean, that's right. That's a part of having a mandate, right? We're seeing these, these cabinet picks and nominees get right through, regardless of how much they want to try to drag it out or filibuster. Like they're coming in, and hopefully we see Kash Patel in the next day or so.
And you see, I think when you look back at his first presidency, most of those positions ended up being acting for his entire presidency because he couldn't get people in and couldn't get them confirmed. And that's one of the big differences you're seeing now, right? They're getting confirmed. People are on board a little bit more. And of course, we have a little more control this time. And I think this last election sent a clear message to all politicians that we, the majority of America, are fed up. And we are going to fire them. And so you saw some people get fired this last election. And I think it was a wake-up call because there were some areas where they didn't think they could get fired. And we showed them that they still answer to the people.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that Republicans typically don't show up very well midterms, right? So Trump is immediately working against a 2-year clock, right? Because if he loses either or both houses, it's done. Any progress will stop immediately. So he's working up against that. On the cartels, we know China plays the long game, right? And they're willing to wait no matter what. Do you think any of these cartels have the patience and or the means to simply wait out Trump, either whether it's to the midterm or beyond, or to when he's out of office? Because the pendulum swings a lot, right? We could end up with another Democrat president and be right back where we were.
Yeah, and so that's a complex question to answer because if you take China and compare China to Mexico and what we have in Mexico, it's two different problems, right? So you have the cartels in Mexico who are driven by greed and money and not necessarily ideology. And when you get down to it, when you look at China, China is definitely playing the long game, and some would even say that Mexico is just the knife that China's using to get at us and stab America, right? And so they are using the Mexicans as a tool, because if you pay attention to China, they believe that the Westerners, the Europeans, who they lump us in as Westerners, right? And they believe wholeheartedly that we tried to wipe out their entire race in the Opium Wars 200 years ago. And this is their Opium War back on us, right? So they don't like us. They want to wipe us off the face of the earth. They have a means to do that through Mexico. And so China is playing a different game and a very long game, while Mexico is driven by greed, machismo, the power, the money, all that stuff. So kind of two different games. And I think when we designated Mexico or the cartels as terrorists, the other thing that does is help with the money, right? It helps cut off those that are funding or helping those cartels. And I think that's where the Mexican government gets very, very nervous, because if they get linked into that, all of a sudden that changes the entire game. And so I think that's why you saw the Mexican president try to flex a little bit and then quickly said, whoa, this is a different ball game, and kind of have to work with the U.S. And they all know, I mean, let's be honest, on the street, here's what they say: Trump don't play. And Trump don't play, right? He's coming for him. And I think he understands that this is a absolute critical point for our nation, if we are to remain a free republic.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to something Rob just said, I mean, I was saying the same thing since the election is he has 2 years, not 4, because it can
Right.
change. And I think that's a big reason why he came in and has been moving at a blitzkrieg pace, because he knows he has to get it in. He has to show enough positive effects and outcomes that people are forgetting about it come midterms, and they know they got to keep it going. I mean, if he
Right.
lobs around and I'll do this and do that, I mean, that's why I think we're just seeing him coming in. Obviously, it's keeping the left on their heels. They can't even they don't know how to slip or dip. They just keep getting right hands and left hands. They're catching everywhere, right? But
Yep.
it really, he has 2 years, and I was saying it on here a while ago, a few weeks back. I think I think the best thing that could have happened was him losing in 20, because
Mhm.
had he one or the other, he wouldn't have had time to sit back and evaluate and analyze, figure out what happened, and learn who he can trust and not trust, because obviously a lot of people came after him at that time, even though they already were. Best thing could
Yeah.
happen for was him not being there in 20 and coming back now, even
Yeah.
though at the time.
Well,
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of
And
that,
if you,
part of that is, I'm sorry, Matt, but part of that is also him. I think had his first years went uncontested, just normal, do what he was going to do, and the Democrats had not done what they were going to do, he would have simply said, "Okay, my mission accomplished," and he would have walked away. But because of who he is and because of what they did, he said, gloves are off. I'm coming in. I'm coming in swinging." And we have them to thank for who we have.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there is no denying God's hand in our nation from the start, right? If you look back at the history of our nation, how we were formed, the battles that we won that we shouldn't have, the things that took place. I mean, even you look back at George Washington crossing the Delaware and how that was an impossible feat, but there were all these natural things that happened that helped with that. But you can look at these natural things and say, like, how is it that the fog rolled in just at that time on that night to cover these people to make that move so that they could go on and win the next battle. So if you look back at our country, God dips his hand in every once in a while to just get us back on pace. And I think that had a big part in our country. We needed Trump when he came in the first time. We absolutely needed him. People got a taste of him. And then the left was very, very scared, right? Because their mafia was getting broken apart. They saw some of their mafia getting messed with, and so they fought back. And then we had to see just how bad they were for the next 4 years for him to be able to come back like he did and get our country back on track. And I think you're absolutely right that it had to happen this way, and they set it up to happen this way, or they kind of set things up so that it did happen this way. And the hope is obviously that people got so fed up during those 4 years that they have a clear understanding. This is almost like the Carter Reagan thing, right? Where they have a clear understanding is we do not ever want that again, right? And they're going to remember that it was very bad during those times. We don't want to go back. So he's going to have his 2 years. We're going to get to midterms. I think we're going to be fine. We get through midterms, and then I think you're going to see Vice President Vance step up and hopefully continue forward with that, and we hold on to control of the country, because right now they're really working. We are working to push criminal organizations from invading our country. They are working internally to get rid of the criminals that are supposed to be our countrymen, but that are exploiting those positions and have become criminals.
I think one thing that no one, I think a lot of people were that are President Trump supporters were sitting there going, you know, man, they came after him the first time, nonstop impeachment after impeachment and this and that. How's he going to get anything done this time? I think a lot of people were worried, like, how's he going to get it done? How's he going to fight this swamp? It was bigger than he ever thought.
Right.
I can't imagine anyone would ever envision. I bet Elon Musk could help him do that. I just guarantee you, it was like, if you're playing your bingo card, Elon Musk, just, you know, the richest billionaire in the world, the darling of the left at the time, you know, all this stuff, PayPal and Tesla and flamethrowers, to be the guy to come in and just root out, you know, and bring, and just like no one would have had on their bingo card all the media saying the name Big Balls for the last 4 days either, right? Like every time you think you see something, it keeps coming. But I mean, I don't think anyone would have thought. They would have thought maybe some financial guru, like some Wall Street guy or someone like that. But
right.
You know, not a rocket scientist, you know.
No, and again, that goes back to my point. I think there's divine intervention, and you know, all these things line up exactly how they need to line up to push us forward and keep the country intact for right now.
Well,
Yeah.
to your point about, you know, Vance stepping up, I think one of the most exciting things to me, and probably to Troy as well, is the number of veterans we're seeing in
Yes,
office. We're
absolutely.
getting back to just like, you know, right after World War II, where these people are coming back from, you know, the 2 decades of war, and
Yeah.
seeing the state that everything is in, and going, you know what, we need to step up again and do something about this. And
Yeah.
I'm super excited about the number of veterans that we have.
Not just the
Yep.
number of,
Yeah. And
but President Trump's first one had a lot of generals, and it was like, what's he trying to do? Bringing all these generals. Now he's got E4s, O4s, O5. I mean, you know, you got an E4 as a vice president. You got an O4. I know Pete for long. He's practically an E4. The SecDef, right? You the DNI. You got all this. I mean, it's your grunts, your lower list, mid-level leaders, that kind of stuff. Not 3- and 4-star generals that are being brought in, which is just.
And again, back to the point from the first presidency compared to the second, I think he understood the mistakes he made in the first presidency to get things done. And this time getting the ground pounders that know what's going on and are connected to the people that matter and that have a servant's heart for their country. And I absolutely agree. It is so awesome to see those who serve get into these positions, the appointed positions, get into the elected positions, because you have these guys and gals coming in that have served their country, and they're taking the place of these people who have taken everything they can from their country for themselves and are self-serving bastards and have done nothing for this country but take. And it's a beautiful thing when you see those people that care about the country, have served the country, and they get in those positions because they truly understand what selflessness is.
Well, Tulsi says it all. I mean, Tulsi says it all the time. It's more difficult to make that decision to go to war when you've been there, right? You know, and these politicians who have never been, whose kids
The
they
war
know will
pigs.
never go, you know, are more eager to go. The Lindsey Grahams are more eager to go pick a fight because they've never been in one, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I really like that.
There's a difference. Lindsey Graham had, but there's a difference going to a combat zone as a JAG officer on a fob, and one out there running patrol and worrying about if the next step's going to be class, right? And that's what you see in the folks that are up there, including, right, some that we didn't mention, but a lot of friends and people I know are all getting in different positions. But Sean Parnell, great guy, been on a show, great author. He and I chewed the same dirt at the same time. In the same battles, but didn't know each other. And he's now the Undersecretary of Defense for Public Relations and in charge of all that stuff, right? You've got who is the other one? I was just on tip of my tongue. Anyways, there's folks that are being appointed and put in positions that are not just the top one, not because obviously the top one has to get nominated and approved. They bring in everyone else. They're bringing in people that are executing. They're bringing in people that make the and that's what, because people complain about Pete that he didn't have all this experience, but Pete knows well enough that no one ever walks into that position, regardless of where they came from, knowing it all. And like anyone in command, you surround yourself by good lieutenants. You surround yourself with people smarter than you, that you do, that you trust, and that trust you that you're going to have their back. That you don't have to know everything about everything. I'm sure.
Well, and I can give you that example with Mark. When Mark ran for sheriff and won for the first time, he had been a deputy. He hadn't been in any command positions. He hadn't been a sergeant. He hadn't been a lieutenant, captain, none of that. But he won an election. And when he won that election, he made very strategic choices for his leadership that he put around him at the executive level. And it was exactly what you're saying. He said, I don't know everything and I don't need to know everything because I've got guys who do. And I'll bring those guys around me. They advise. And I was one of those guys. We advised him the best we could based on what we know from being experts in the industry. And he ran a hell of a sheriff's office as a sheriff. He was a good sheriff, ran a good office, and did a fantastic job as a leader because of that model.
That's how you tell. That's a quick distinction or identifier of a good leader. There's those that walk in and just want to change everything so they can put their stamp on it, and they don't take time to current situation if it's broke or not broke. And there's those that come in and just sit back and listen and take a temperature of what the climate is, and then look for where the efficiencies are, and then find the right people to put in there. And those are the and at the end of the day, they have to make the decision, right? The buck stops with them, but they're participative and delegative leaders that will work alongside that and say, what's the kind of Matt, what's the best way to do this? How should we approach this thing? It was on Mark to make the final decision. He may take your input, he may come up with his own or something else, but that's a sign of what a leader is and not a manager, right? They're there to succeed, but they're there to make their people that are around them succeed even more, right? That's what
absolutely.
But any aspirations for a sheriff deputy one time?
No, because that was a discussion between Mark and I when he decided to run for Senate, and I did not have interest in that. And actually, our current sheriff, Mark and I sat down and we both had a discussion, and I knew at that time was not interested in that. I feel like I'm good in my position, and I feel like I serve in my position for a sheriff well, but moving up, it's just a different position than mine. I'm an operational guy, and the sheriff position itself is a little bit different. So it was not a desire, and so we found a lieutenant that had a lot of the same style, values, all that stuff that Mark had, and he took it on, and he asked me to stay, which is actually we're trying to figure it out, but I think I am the first undersheriff or chief deputy that has crossed over administrations, because typically I would be much like a vice president. If a president leaves, that vice president goes with him. When a sheriff leaves, typically your XO, your second in command, goes as well. You don't stay and serve the next sheriff, and I was asked to stay and serve the next sheriff, which was a really cool honor for me because he's a great guy, and of course I love the agency. I've been there my whole adult life.
Speaks volumes about yourself.
It probably helps that him and Mark are, like you said, are probably cut from the same cloth, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it hasn't been a big learning curve, and I'm sure he's leaning on you for a lot of your experience and what you've been doing and all that. And so I kind of want to take me to the next thing. When you look at the federal agencies you're working with, when you're looking at the folks on that have been working in there, have you, with obviously not naming names or whatever, are there any that give you concern that they may not be supporting the president's vision, or do you feel everyone is all aligned with what needs to happen and are all for it?
Well, I don't hang out with those dudes, so I don't hang out with dudes that don't support the current president. Because those aren't my people. So any of the people that I'm having discussions with, and I think I know there are some dissenters in the different federal agencies, and I know that from some of the people that I know and talk to in those agencies. But I can tell you this, that and it really pisses me off because people are like, oh, well, they're just going after people. No, they're not. What they're doing in these federal agencies is they're saying, this is our mission. This is how we're doing it. If you don't agree with that, you can hit the road, Jack. And they're making them hit the road. Like, I don't agree with doing X, Y, and Z. Well, cool. The president of the United States says that's what we're doing. And if you don't agree with that, then go find another job. That's what's happening. And so I think there's a lot more that are just ready to do work again. Because like I said, we're pretty much all cops. There are those that are pretending, and I think those are the ones that are leaving.
Are you seeing an increase in recruiting in the agencies again? Like under 4 years of Biden and COVID and everything just really decimated law enforcement across the board. Are you seeing more interest in going that route now?
Yeah. So 2020 kicked us all in the groin, right? And in law enforcement. And from 2020 forward, Biden and his administration did us no favors. And so we have seen an uptick. And I can tell you today, I just came from a graduation a couple hours ago where we graduated 6 deputies. And we were typically, for the past 4 years, we are graduating 1 here, 2 there. A lot of people questioning, do I really want to get into that line of work or not? Because they didn't feel supported. That was when you get down to the brass taxes. I don't feel supported. I feel like I'm going to be made an example of if, the wrong news channel gets a hold of whatever I did to some guy that I had to arrest. And I think with the switch in the federal administration, because quite frankly, there was a fear of the DOJ because the DOJ was headhunting. And they can deny that all they want, but that's what was going on. They were doing that here in our state. They were doing that across the nation. And they were headhunting any agencies or any cops that did not align with a political view. And so that kind of screwed our profession over. But I think we are seeing the pendulum swing back. People are understanding that the rule of law is back in place. And I think the citizens, much like we had to go through as a country that bad presidency for the last 4 years to get this good president, I think what's happening is citizens are seeing we didn't like all the lawlessness and all the crap that went along with defund the police and all that. And so that we're getting a lot of public support back behind us as well.
Yeah, when you're under that that major scrutiny, every mistake is magnified. So,
Right.
and we all make mistakes, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
it's good to see law enforcement is gonna start being supported again. We absolutely needed.
Hey,
Agreed.
Before we get books and this stuff, I do have a question from a friend of mine that's listening. She said that a friend of hers who's Venezuelan said that last time they went to Caracas, they said it was awesome. All the ballot elements were gone. They said the streets were clean, with the implication that they've all come here. Have you seen that influx? And we hear about things on the news, but have you seen that it's truly, as President Trump said, they're dumping their prisons and insane asylums across on the other side of the border to come into America? Because apparently Caracas is a nice vacation spot now.
Well, so over the past 4 years, yes, we have seen So what used to be traditionally in our state, especially Arizona, right? We would get influx of Mexican citizens that were coming into the U.S. And they would come here, typically, right, for a better life, and that truly was, back in the day, that was it. You would see a family come up from Mexico because they had family here and they were coming up to find some jobs, have a better life. They would send a lot of money back home to relatives. That was all a thing. Over the past few years, it was majority military age males from like 70 different countries, and a lot of them that really don't like the U.S. And so it was evident that they were pushing out their gangsters. We're getting a lot of the different gangs. I mean, TDA is one of the big ones, right? The Venezuelan gang that everybody is dealing with right now. They were pushing those guys up here. So the Venezuelan gangs, the Salvadorian gangs, the cartel members, obviously, and then we were getting the jihadis from overseas. They're pushing them through. So yeah, and again, that was what went on for several years, and in mass numbers. And so now what you're seeing is the president's czar and all of those federal agencies are trying to take it back. And anybody in law enforcement can tell you, and LA is a perfect example for us because we're close to California. When LA stopped doing the gang enforcement stuff and the gangs started to take over again, when you decide as a law enforcement agency, we got to go take those neighborhoods back, it is not easy and it is not pretty. They do not want to give that up, right? And so you're seeing that now. You have hardcore criminals that have infiltrated our country and are hidden amongst the regular citizens. And Trump and his DOJ and a lot of those ancillary departments are having to go root those guys out. And that's a tough, tough job, man.
So you segued right into kind of my next thing, which is I'm kind of curious for your personal perspective. How concerned are you that all the people coming across from, again, countries all over the world, a lot of Islamic terrorist organization harboring countries, China, all that stuff? We always know about sleeper cells and this kind of stuff, especially in terrorist out of terrorist organizations. How concerned are you that that they're here and if that DOJ and the different factions of federal law enforcement and state local don't get to them quick enough that they're just waiting for the call to execute.
Oh, they're here.
Yeah. Are you?
Yeah, they're. Am I concerned? Absolutely, I'm concerned because of the millions of people that were let in unchecked, and of those millions, I mean, you just take 1% of the. I think the number they'll agree to, they being the other side, is 15 million. So you take 1% of that as bad guys, and that's a lot of bad guys in our country, right? And they can set up quite a network with that many bad guys. And as you guys know, the sleeper cells are obviously a big concern because they're just waiting for the call, right? And then you have these lone wolf attacks like you saw in New Orleans, and whether that guy was activated or just decided on his own he is going to go kill Americans. Either way, you have violence attached to that, and it is very concerning. And I can tell you, having kids, that's like my big concern because I've lived a good life. I didn't plan on living this long, so I feel like I've made it. And I'm not so much worried about me. I'm worried about my kids and my grandkids. And because I think back to growing up, and of course we had the drills where we'd get under the desk and the horn would go off in case we were getting bombed by Russia. But you never really felt like they were here amongst us and could attack you at any time. Right. And I think that's the feeling now, especially for us in law enforcement, is we know some bad people got in our country that mean to do us harm. We don't know exactly what their plans are. There's a lot of indications that October 7th for Israel was just a test run for the things they want to do to our country. So that concerns me.
Yeah, that's, you see the attack yesterday in Munich, right? The guy with the vehicle and stuff. So they don't even have to have access to, we've seen that a lot overseas in Nice, France. And again, just last night and there we've seen attacks in China and all over the place where where people don't even have to have a weapon, where they make anything into a weapon. But I got to imagine. I know when I was in a different job, different role with it, where I was seeing a lot of stuff that most Americans could never see. It led to a lot of drinking and sleepless nights. I got to imagine, you're seeing that because is the next active shooter call just someone that's mental, or is this the coordinated attack, right?
Right.
Is this accident, or you heard someone ran into a crowd? Was it just a person that hit the gas instead of a brake, or is this what we're talking about? So, yeah, that's
Yep.
and their kids aren't safe in school. They're not safe in the theater, not safe in the mall. I mean, but at the same time, you don't want to just hunker down and not live your life.
Right. Right. And that's kind of, for me, that's, our family operates like that. We are aware, but we're not going to stop what we're doing because that's when they win, right? And we're going to keep
Right.
doing what we do, and we're going to stay free. And you hope that now with this coordinated effort amongst the not only the feds but the military, federal partners, state and locals, all talking again, all communicating, all working towards the same goal, that we could have these guys on their heels a little bit. And I think we're getting more and more prepared by the day, and that we have a better understanding of each other's roles. And I think that's helping with this problem because, again, the bad guys are here. And all we can hope is when they do go into active mode, that we can kill those bastards as fast as possible so that they do the least amount of damage, and then root out any more of them. And just get rid of them.
So let's talk about, you just came back from DC. You were there with sheriff's deputies, I think, from different agencies, right? How did that go? What was that about, that you were just there? Why were you there?
So we were there for it's a national conference of sheriffs. So sheriffs from across the country get together, just basically spend a few days together talking about the current issues, what we're facing at local level, and then what we're facing at national level, have discussion with our national partners. And then we also get a chance. We have a Capitol Hill Day where we get a chance to go and meet with our respective congressmen, congresswomen, and senators, and go sit down and have discussions with them, which were all great. And even for us, we have a mix of senators, congressmen on both sides of the aisle. And we sat down with both sides and had good discussions with them. And I can tell you, like, even our senators are both from the other side of my aisle. And we had good, honest discussions with them, and it was not contentious. They heard us out, and we talked through some things. And of course, they have some different ideologies than us, but I think that's where we need to get back to, right? And it feels like we're getting back to that the ones that are screaming and yelling at each other and causing all the division, that is starting to get pushed out. At least it felt like it. Like a lot of them are being treated kind of like the outsiders now. Like, nobody wants to hang out with you guys. Get out of here. And we're able to sit down and talk like adults, and talk because we're countrymen, right? The person sitting across the table from me is my countryman. And we should be able to have disagreements, but still have discussions, and we should pick whatever's best for the country. And those are the decisions we should make. And it felt a lot better being in DC this time than it had in quite a while.
Yeah.
So putting on your DC hat for a second, because I mean, you probably know more about the immigration system than I'll ever know, right? Obvious control over the border is number one priority. But how would you fix our immigration system to make it better and more effective?
Oh, dude, you're talking way above my pay grade, but I can tell you where we've seen it not work well is the processing part of people trying to legally get here, right? And I can give you an example. We have a friend of our family that we met one Christmas because they needed help, and a friend of a friend told us about this family that needed some help, so we went over to help them, and figured out pretty quickly that the mom was here illegally. And she had kids that were US born, but she was here illegally, and she was trying to get her citizenship. And the process is so cumbersome and so hard. and not streamlined at all. And she had not been in Mexico in like a decade, right? And so she was a Mexican citizen. And so as she's going through the process, keep in mind she's got American kids, so they were born here. She's got some family that have their citizenship and they're on the US side. She's an illegal trying to get her citizenship. As part of the whole process, they ship her back to Mexico. They tell her, you have to go back to Mexico and you have to wait in Mexico 6 to 9 months while we process everything to get you back over. And so she has to leave her family, her kids included. Her kids stayed here with family members because she didn't want to take them back to that country and expose them to where she was going to have to live and stuff. And so stuff like that, man, we should be able to fix that kind of stuff because she was a productive citizen. She wanted to be here. She was, just a normal person in our society. So that kind of stuff has to get fixed. And then they have to make coming in illegally, they have to deter that, right? They have to make that unattractive. And so shipping them back, and then these asylum seekers, that is the most ridiculous thing because again, 70 countries, and they're coming here and they're saying, oh, we're seeking asylum. Okay, what about the 10 countries you went through to get here? Right? So you're not seeking asylum in the US. You just want to be in the US because asylum seekers get to the first safe spot and that's it, done.
Right. Well, I don't think you should be able to come over illegally and then try to claim asylum. We
Right.
have ports of entry, and you should have to go through that port of entry to claim asylum. Once you've already broken the law, you're now a criminal.
Yeah.
And you
And
shouldn't be allowed to.
I can tell you that not necessarily to that point, but it reminded me that one of the areas we're really failing in as a country is judges to hear these cases, to get them processed through, because over the past 4 years, we went up to, I think the last timeline. So at the end of last year, before we switched administrations, I think court hearings were pushed out 9 to 12 years. So if you came in illegally, got processed through by Border Patrol as an asylum seeker or whatever, they gave you your paperwork and they said, okay, your court date is 9 to 10 or 9 to 12 years out. You got to promise to come back and you got to let us know where you're going to be. And there you go. Welcome to the US. And that's because they don't have the things in place to process the people through that they need to process.
It's insane.
Yeah, we were hearing they were getting those notices to appear and just let go or bust or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully,
they had these, we would stop them all the time. They were like, illegal immigrant Ubers. So they would drive out of Phoenix, they would go down to the ports of entry, and they would tell people like, hey, we will give you a ride, for $100 a person, we'll drive you up to Phoenix. But you have to show us your Border Patrol paperwork that you've been processed. So the driver would check everybody. Okay, paperwork. Okay, you 6 get in my car, drive you up to Phoenix. I'll make $600. We would stop them, pull them over, and the driver would say, hey, they all have their paperwork. They're all legal now because Border Patrol has processed them. I'm simply driving them from point A to point B, but I make sure they have their paperwork. So I'm not driving illegal aliens. I'm driving people who have been processed by Border Patrol.
And short of him having a traffic infraction, then he's sent on his way.
Yeah, right.
You can do about it. Yeah, I mean that's a big one, and a part of that was getting rid of the Remain in Mexico, right? Getting rid of the Title II stuff, all those kind of things. And we talked about it in the show before. We've talked to not only did it not have enough people for there, right? But the federal government pulled from their the only hospital staff they have, the VA. They pulled a ton of doctors, a ton of case workers, all that stuff down there to process those people, which now slowed down and delayed processing of medical care for veterans. I mean, they pulled all.
I know.
I mean, I'm up here in upstate New York, and several friends of mine work for CBP and ICE and stuff and DHS, and they were all having to rotate down and do their time.
Well, and I can tell you that that particular instance hit us personally. My nephew, who was he was 82nd Airborne, and he's had cancer 4 times now, and since he got out, and they linked it back to burn pits. His last bout, he just had surgery for cancer of his kidney. So one of his kidneys was cancerous, and it took the VA, I believe it was 11 months, to notify him that he had cancer and they needed to surgically remove it. And so we were like, okay, so he had cancer almost a year ago, and you're just now telling him that it's a cancer that needs to be removed. And so how many stages has it upped since he first got
Right.
tested, right? And so stuff like that, and that goes on every day across the country with numerous vets.
Yeah, I have my own personal story. I could tell you the same thing. Exact same kind of scenario that they knew, and they took him months and months to even get him in for a first look, and he's not with us anymore, right? And when people ask me, guys that he's guys served with, and they said, "How'd he pass?" I'm like, cancer in the VA. Like that's what killed him, was cancer in
Right.
the VA. He could have probably still been here if it wasn't for the same concept, the kind of thing. So
Did
you've
they have
written
to remove his whole kidney, or did they just have to remove just the cancer?
No, they had to take one whole kidney, so he's left with one, and he said, "Hey, God gave me two for a reason," so
Yeah,
he gave up
he,
the one willingly.
he sounds like a paratrooper, just like make the best of it.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
don't mess that one up. But so yeah, Interceptors, the untold fight against the Mexican cartels, that came out a little bit over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Crazy. When you look back at what came together, we're gonna have you on again because we're gonna talk about that specifically once I get finished wrapped up with it, because I'm so excited to ask, but I don't want to mess it up and start asking about it now. I want to do it in
All
one
good.
show. In what you learned and what you experienced and what you wrote about then, do
Yeah.
you see a chance of a second one, to like maybe after this administration gets through like a year or two, kind of like compare and contrast, or do you see another book coming?
I don't see another one like that coming, and a part two coming. No, but I have thought about a second book quite a bit because there's more stories to be told, and what I've found that has been really cool is both the veteran community and the law enforcement community uh, are super cool about stuff like that, because you're putting it out there, and you always have imposter syndrome because I did some cool stuff, but there's a lot of dudes that have done a lot more than me and sacrificed a lot more than me, and so you always feel like, well, who the hell am I, right? And the cool thing has been that a lot of the vets and a lot of the cops have been like, dude, this was awesome, thank you for writing a book like this, and thank you for letting people know about the things that we do. So that kind of makes you feel like, oh man, I want to put more out there, because people do need to know the sacrifices that are made in these careers, and these dudes that just, and when I say dudes, I'm talking girls and guys, but the people that just put their lives on the line every day, their families, and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that nobody understands. And I was telling the story to a guy, and this is something simple, right? He was like, well, what's something you do that normal people don't do? And I said, well, I guess probably a plan of action at a grocery store in case I see somebody that I've arrested. And he's like, what? And I said, so like my family, we have different plans of action. So uh, based on my career and the people that I deal with, you have to make different plans of action, security protocols and stuff, so that if this happens, then the family knows to do this, right? And if this happens, the family knows to do, and people don't even know stuff like that. And then when you tell them like, yeah, my family has this whole plan, they're like, oh my God, you got to live like that? Like, yeah, that's part of the job, and so I think putting that kind of stuff out there, and it's not for, hey, look at me, or woe is me. It's to let them know, like, there's a lot of sacrifices that go into this work, and the veteran community and the police community.
Or even just having the knowledge to do, right? Some people, I remember back when the term hypervigilance was looked at as a bad thing, right? You got out of combat,
Right.
veteran tour, like, dude, quit freaking out about trash on the side of the road. Quit thinking you have to carry a gun with you all the time to do this stuff. Now,
Right.
hypervigilance is like, a lot of people probably wish they had those kind of intuitions and things, because you got to keep your head on a swivel, because you just never know when someone's going to just lose it or try to shove you down a subway train or whatever, right? And it's like,
Right.
now looked at as an asset of a characteristic versus a
Right.
lie, you know.
Yep.
But that's a good one. So you are very social media popular. So
I
you
don't know
talk
if
about,
that's good or bad.
well, I mean, out there you make some great videos. You're great on IG and everything like that. But you're pretty, you're pretty much out there. You're pretty open and transparent to a degree that you could be safely. Do you ever worry about? I'm sure you probably get recognized and stuff, but I mean, do you ever worry about people seeing you? Not that you've arrested them, but maybe they're not fans of cops or whatever, but they've seen you from the social media. Have you ever run into anybody that is, or do you ever get a lot of hate online from folks that are just not law enforcement friendly?
So yeah, I mean, the hate always comes, right? You get the people that throw hate your way, but honestly, I don't really pay attention to them because it's not worth my energy. So a lot of positive, a lot more positive than negative. Do I worry about the safety part of it? Do they so I do get recognized. The weirdest thing is to get called by your Instagram name in public, right? Where somebody will be like, "Hey, deputy, one time." Like, yeah, it's just Matt, dude. Matt's cool.
Yeah.
But you get recognized. But the cool thing is, especially when you run into younger generation and they're like, "Hey, I follow you, and I like this or I like that." Uh, then it kind of brings it home for you because I'm just I'm trying to be a good influence, on not only my profession, but I'm just trying to be a good human. And so I just have fun with my social media. I like being recognized. I like talking to people. And my wife says that I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually an introvert. But I enjoy all of that. And I would say that the haters, again, I don't pay attention to them. And have I had them come up to me in public? There's been a few, but I'm used to it because I've been hated my whole career, right? People tend to hate us till they need us. And that's not everybody, but that's a percentage of people. And so you're kind of used to it, used to the hate and used to them spewing that at you. And it's whatever, man. Because I know there's something in their life that I'm not going to fix. So,
Well, you have a lot of good range videos. So I imagine people that are shooters and like probably like you and probably drop the handle when they see you. And
I do get some shooter love, but I gotta say, like, because I've got some friends that are actual shooters and like actually hit their targets. Mine are a lot of spraying and praying. I can do my fair share, but
you just kind of shoot that way and hope you hit the target.
yeah, if you notice my videos, you're not hearing or seeing a lot of the hits. You're just seeing a lot of the shooting.
Have you ever, just real quick, we're gonna wrap up here. Have you ever pulled anyone over and they recognize you from that and be like, "Oh, you're deputy one time"? Have you ever had that happen?
So yeah, the funniest one was I pulled over to help a young lady who had a flat tire. And as I got out and I was trying to figure out like how we're going to get her off the road, right? Because I didn't have a push bar on this vehicle. And so I was trying to figure out like, man, how are we going to get you out of the road here? Because it's dangerous. And a dude in a big old truck stops and he's like, "Deputy, one time I follow you on Instagram." And I'm like, "All right, cool, bro." I said, "Hey man, I need some help getting her off the road. Will you help?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." So he pulls over and we get her out of the road, and then he wanted to take a selfie, so we did a selfie. And yeah, so it's, and again, that's stuff like that. It does not bother me at all. I think it's kind of cool how social media has made that a thing, because I mean that's the epitome of community policing right there, right? Is a community member recognizes you and they recognize you as a person, and so they just stop. They interact with you as a person, not as I'm a uniform and they're a civilian.
Right.
I
Right.
love
Did he help?
watching Deputy Sloop. Is that his name?
Yep, slope.
Yeah. I love watching his videos on YouTube.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I came to his videos through, following yourself and Sheriff Lamb.
Yep.
He's got some great videos.
Yeah, for sure. And Frank's just a down to earth dude, right?
Yeah.
And people like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of there's definitely a lot of YouTube channels out there, gun porn YouTube, from Demolition Ranch, Donut Operator, all those different ones that you can.
Oh, Donut's awesome.
Demolition Ranch is now retired.
Yeah, I saw
Oh,
that.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could just spend all day just watching that and just hearing plink, plink, plink. Well, I mean, we're watching yours, probably plinking, but that will. But hey, man, anything else before we wrap up? Anything you'd want to tell our listeners and viewers? Anything we didn't cover that you just want them to be aware of, or anything you want to just highlight?
No, man, just what I would highlight is like as we go through these are unprecedented times for our country, and all I would say is just be good humans to each other, man. That's what we need in the world.
Yep, absolutely. Which is kind of the basic tenet, I think, of any normal sane society, right?
Yeah,
And
yep,
that is a God-fearing society of any type. But yeah,
absolutely.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for giving us some of your evening, man. It's great catching up with you again. Been too long. Rob, thanks for coming, being part of it. And man, again, we'll have you on soon. I just got to knuckle down. I got to sit down and get this book finished, get my notes
All
together, and then ready to strap in because I'm going to be hitting you with all kind of stuff. But
well, we got to give him time to finish his next book so we can bring him back on.
Yeah, we could, I want to get to it before he gets that one wrapped up since he isn't started yet. But yeah. Maybe he could come up with a how to be a law enforcement social influencer kind of book. You could do a how to social dummies in uniform. But
yeah.
Guys, well, hey, thank you all so much, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Be sure and follow us on all of our socials. We are everywhere. Rob is doing a great job. We're getting out there. Let your friends, let your family, let your enemies all know about it. Tune in here at Stu and the Nun, and we'll see you all. Have a good night.
See you guys.